What is up? Welcome into the Lambeau Speak, episode number 11. Got a big special guest tonight. We're joined by the Pack-A-Day podcast, Andy Herman. I am Nate Wallen. You can find me on Twitter at Nate_Dirt19. And of course, my friend Bobby. You can find him on Twitter at Bobby A Winner. And of course, our special guest at Andy Herman NFL on the Twitter machine. How you doing tonight, Andy?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Really appreciate it. And congrats on episode 11. Sounds still new, but very exciting, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been fun. We kind of, a couple months ago started talking and started out as doing it every other week. And, I know you're releasing an episode every single day, about 20, 25 minutes. It's awesome. And, I know I can speak for both of us when I say we both enjoy Pack-A-Day. And I know it's one of the first ones I tune into anymore. How about you, Bobby?
Yeah, absolutely. Once I found out you were coming on, I was elated. I watch all of your stuff every day. I mean, you're putting out tons of content every single day about training camp and stuff. And that's why we really wanted to have you on because, I mean, you have eyes on the players. So who better to ask?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you guys having me. Always happy to talk Packers.
Oh yeah, it's fun to. As I told Bobby, it's nice to finally get to do this. I've been doing the Toilet House thing for a little while, and try to not be too biased. But now it's nice I can actually just talk about the Packers every time. So
exactly.
Real quick before we get started, you can find the show at Toilet Styles, of course. Find all of our articles and everything, videos, ranking stuff on our website, toiletstyles.com. If you're listening to us on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe. We'd appreciate that. And if you're on Apple, give us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. So before we get any further, we'll go talk to Andy. You've been doing this for quite a while. So if you want to tell everybody, where they can find you, before I forget that, I make sure I wanted to ask you that. So
yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. And of course, you can find Pack-A-Day on YouTube and wherever you get your favorite podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever we're out there. And you can find it 365 days a year, of course.
Oh yeah. So I guess before we get going, Bob, you got anything you want to ask before we jump into training camp?
Yeah, actually, I had a couple of questions. Most of them were kind of about training camp. We've been seeing a lot of shuffling of the offensive line. Now, I know there's still a lot of training camp to be played and obviously all the preseason games, but just from what you've seen so far, how would you expect the offensive line to look week one?
Yeah, I think that the difficult part of answering this question is it's clouded slightly by David Bakhtiari. And I don't mean necessarily in the fact that is he going to play week one or not. I think everyone expects him to be able to play week one and, hopefully play the vast majority of the season. But when he misses practices, what that really makes it is that Yash is basically practicing at left tackle, which then Zach has to practice at right tackle, which means Josh is practicing at center, right? And if you wanted to go in a different direction, if you wanted to go Zach at center, and if you wanted to go, Yash at right tackle, you would ideally like to get them as many reps there as possible so that they can continue to practice exactly that way heading into the season. But with David missing time recently, like I said, Yash has to be at left, Josh is at center, and Zach's then at right. I think ultimately what happens to begin with is just kind of based on that in practice time and availability. I'd expect David to be at left tackle, Elton at left guard, Josh to start at center. I think John Runyon Jr. clearly at right guard, and then Zach Tom at right tackle. But I think the leash is going to be extremely short on Josh Myers. And if things do not start going right, and assuming Bakhtiari's health is good to go, and he's, they're out there every week at left tackle. If things go poorly at center with Josh, I think then Zach would kick inside and they'd go with Yash at right tackle. I don't think it's decided by any means. I think they're going to legitimately do the same old, get the 5 best guys out there. I think Zach is clearly one of those best 5. In fact, I think he's number 4. And then the question just becomes, again, assuming Bakhtiari's healthy, do you want Yash at right tackle with Zach at center? Do you want Josh at center with Zach at right tackle? So a couple of different ways that they could go, but I think they'll, probably keep it more status quo to begin with. And then, like I said, if there's anything that goes awry, then the leash is probably pretty short with Josh at center.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was thinking. Just with how many different players they've had filling in at center and taking snaps, it does seem like his leash is pretty short. And Zach
Agreed.
Tom is probably the second best tackle on the team. I thought he played pretty well last year for a rookie, and it's hard to come into the league. You were blocking college athletes, and all of a sudden you're blocking grown men. The transition's pretty hard, but I thought he held up pretty well, and I'm excited to see his year 2 leap.
Agreed. And I think the other thing too is he put on some size in the offseason, which was his biggest thing, is just the bull rush, the handling of the 330-pound guys on the inside. Those are things that were hard for him with his weight and where he was at a season ago. So a little bit more functional strength is going to go a long way for him. The footwork still looks great. The technique still works great. Now he's got a little bit more muscle. I think that's going to serve him very well going into this year.
That's awesome.
And I guess the big thing too, I was going to say that Rashawn Gary was back at practice. That was huge to see. I know they're obviously in Cincinnati this week, getting ready for the preseason game. But what have you heard with Rashawn Gary as opposed? Is week one is that a possibility, or are we thinking maybe? I know I heard you say maybe it was Monday that he could start the season. Obviously on the roster, but I just curious how things look.
Yeah, it's so early to tell yet with Rashawn, and to know if he's going to be able to go week one. I think it's certainly worth celebrating that he's already practicing, even if it's just in individual drills, and they're going to be able to slowly ramp him up from here, right? Start with individuals, see how he responds, maybe give him a day off here or there, then slowly work him into probably more of like the walkthrough team activities, and then eventually into real team activities, and then ultimately probably make the decision whether or not he's ready to go week one. I think one of the things that clouds that decision is you're going to Soldier Field week one, arguably one of the worst fields in the National Football League, if not the worst field in the National Football League. Is that the way that you want to start off, Rashawn Gary on the season is on that turf? And, it's obviously grass, but it's horrible, right? So maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they'll keep him out 1 week longer. I will say this, if Rashawn is ready to go, they're going to have to hold him back and probably, tell him that the plane is leaving at a different time than what it is, because there's no way in heck that he is going to allow them to basically keep him out of the game if he's ready to go. So sometimes you have to save the player from himself, and that could be the case. They're not, even though they activate him off the PUP list, the only thing that means at this point is that he can't go back on the PUP list, right? Doesn't mean that he has to play week one. Doesn't mean that he will play week one. He could play week one. They could also keep him on the active roster after cutdowns and then IR him and keep him out for the first 3 weeks and bring him back after that once he's ready to go. So nothing's set in stone at this point. Remember, if memory serves, I believe Bakhtiari and Jenkins were activated off of PUP and not placed on IR to begin the year a season ago. And neither of them played week one against Minnesota. So there's a lot of different directions that they can go in. They're going to use an abundance of caution when making that decision. But I think the big thing right now is just to celebrate that he's back practicing, and his impact out on the practice field will be felt because he is that type of emotional player out on the field that's going to rally the defense around him.
It's awesome, man. It's got me so fired up, man. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about was the safety group. So Nate and I believe that the safety position is probably the biggest hole on the roster. And they didn't do too much in the offseason to kind of fill in the holes there. I think it has the potential to be the biggest training camp battle. How have the safeties looked so far, and who do you think would be the starters as of now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been okay, and I think it's kind of been as expected. I will say this. I think Jonathan Owens has played very, very well. I think he's been really good in coverage. I think he's been good coming up and supporting the run, and he's been the starter with the safeties more recently. I think his name is firmly entrenched in that battle. Darnell Savage had the pick six the other day. He's had some rough patches as well. It's sort of the very Darnell Savage that we've seen over the last couple seasons, some wild plays here and there, but some real inconsistencies as well. But I think he's probably still the leader in the clubhouse to be one of those safeties. Rudy Ford got a lot of the initial snaps at starting safety. We haven't seen him quite as much. And then Tavarius Moore has been rotated in and out as well. I'd be surprised if the starting two did not come from those four. Ennis Gaines, right now injured, also basically moved to corner at this point. Anthony Johnson Jr. has not seemed to be in that conversation or taken a step towards a starting opportunity in any capacity as of yet. I don't think Dallin Levitt is in that conversation. So it really legitimately seems to be those four with two starting spots on the line. If I were betting today, I would lean towards Darnell Savage and Jonathan Owens, but I really legitimately think that any of those four could end up being the starters on day one. It wouldn't shock me. And quite honestly, I don't know that it matters all that much because I think they're all in the same vicinity of like talent, right? They're all going to bring something different to the table. I think Tavarius Moore a little bit quicker. I think he's got a little bit better ball skills. Rudy Ford's going to be the better run defender. I think Jonathan Owens gives you a little bit of everything, but great at nothing. And Darnell Savage is going to give you some of the flash plays, but some super inconsistent stuff as well. So they all give you something different, and it's just going to be sort of their flavor of the week and what they want to play at that given position. But I think it's going to be a struggle. I think it's their weakest position on the team by far. And I think the other crazy thing is you look at the 4 I just mentioned, Dallin Levitt, those 5, all 1-year deals, no team control going into next year. The only safety that's under team control going into 2024, Anthony Johnson Jr., right? So like, this is not only a problem in 2023, but even if you're looking ahead and like developmental players or things like that, especially now that Innis Gaines is basically a corner, the only player under team control in 2024 at safety is Anthony Johnson Jr., a 7th round pick. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Maybe they'll finally, address it like we've been talking about, whether it was free agency or the draft. Like, we'll figure it out. It's like we're kind of running out of time and choices here. So
exactly. And John Johnson just signed too. He signed with the Rams. He was out there and is a player that I know had played in Joe Barry's system. Obviously played with the Rams during Joe Barry's time there, and that was a player that I think some people thought maybe Green Bay could still go out and sign before the start of the season. He just re-signed with the Rams, so really top safety on the market. Also now gone too. So it's going to be 2 of those 4 players.
We did an episode 2 weeks ago about free agents. He was my number 1 free agent. I thought it just made so much sense. I don't know why they didn't pursue him.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But if you want to go, I guess for me, your biggest surprise, whether it's player or just whatever for training camp, or your top 3, if you want to go through those for us.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like somebody I would consider a massive surprise. It's not like he was a bench player that's all of a sudden come on and all of a sudden is like amazing, right? But Rasul Douglas has been phenomenal. And I mean phenomenal. He has looked every bit as good, if not better, than he did 2 seasons ago when he had his breakout year in Green Bay. You can tell he's so much more comfortable playing on the outside. He just never looked himself starting in the slot, practicing in the slot. Remember, they practiced him a little bit at safety last year as well. They were trying to find that spot, basically thinking Stokes and Jaire were going to be the long-term corner. So how do we get this guy in the field? I think the Stokes injury to Douglas and maybe even this defense may have been a small blessing in disguise in getting Rasul back to that outside corner spot, because man, he is shutting down everything. Anything that's even caught is contested and is like a short gain. It like 5-yard little hitch routes that, we're used to seeing like the opposing teams complete with ease. Like Rasul is all over that stuff. Like, so he has been phenomenal. And that is no easy task playing opposite Jaire, because no one's throwing at Jaire. So, the ball's coming your way, and it has not mattered. Rasul's been over everything. So I think that's probably number 1 on my list. The young defensive linemen, from Devontae Wyatt to Carl Brooks to Colby Wooden to even Jonathan Ford, that group has been a pleasant surprise so far. Now, how that translates on Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, etc., will remain to be seen. They're going to have to hold up against the run, which we're not going to know until the pads come on and real bullets start flying, right? But I do think that their ability to penetrate into the backfield has just been different, and there's a lot more juice and sexiness to that position from just being able to get in the backfield and make some plays than I think we saw out of Jerron Reed and Dean Lowry in the past. So that probably has me a little bit excited. And then I think just the play of Quay Walker too is stood out a little bit in his ability just to play faster, play more instinctual football. He seems to be in the right direction towards taking that second year step. Again, a lot of that's going to be pads coming on, going against live action, and we're really going to be able to tell at that point. But that's been another, I think, pleasant surprise. And one other one really quick, talking about a player that kind of came out of nowhere, Carrington Valentine, 7th round pick. He's been one of the surprises of training camp. He's been fantastic. Did let a interception go through his hands the other day, but the read on the ball was phenomenal. High pointed it. It just unfortunately slipped through his hands and ended up in a touchdown with Jaden Reed getting it off a deflection. But he has been really good, and the clear corner number 4 right now with Stokes still injured, and really outside corner number 3. So really, really impressive camp from him so far.
That's awesome. Yeah. That actually may have just answered my next question, but I was just going to ask you who the most impressive rookie has been so far.
Yeah, I think there's been ups and downs, or like there's been different players at different time periods, right? So I think you go back to OTAs and minicamp, and I thought Van Ness and Musgrave and those 2 for sure were at the head of the list. Carrington Valentine had a really good OTAs and mini camps as well. But I would say like those players were at the top of the list. And then I think come training camp, Musgrave still had his moments. Van Ness is still at his moments, but I think Jaden Reed has made the biggest jump. Going back to OTAs and minicamps too, Malik Heath of all people too was somebody who was having a really nice OTAs and minicamps. And then you come to training camp. I think Musgrave, I think at the beginning had a little bit of a learning curve. You could see it from Tucker Kraft as well. Van Ness going up against pads. There's been a little bit of a learning curve there, but Jaden Reed, the player that's made the biggest jump in my opinion from OTAs and minicamps to training camp, he looks like a totally different player. I had some nerves coming out of OTAs and mini camps of being like, ugh, there's a little Amari Rogers here coming off. And I'm like, I didn't want to like get to that yet because people would have freaked out. And then like all of a sudden he comes into camp and it's like, oh my goodness, this is nothing like Amari. Like he is fast, quick, better route runner, better everything. And it's just like, it was just been a night and day difference. You can tell it clicked for him starting in training camp. Carl Brooks, as I mentioned, is making plays every single day. Carrington Valentine has had a great OTAs and mini camps and training camps. So there's been a lot of them. And I think, again, there's been different points where different players have kind of been that guy. But I think the promising thing is that there have been multiple players that have flashed at different times.
Yeah, it seems like this draft class, obviously there were so many players in this draft class, but they're going to be contributing a lot more as rookies than I think some of the most recent draft classes have. It's really interesting.
Well, I think first of all, it's a young team. There's only 4 players over the age of 28 and one of them's a punter. So like, it's just going to be a much younger team. And then second, when you've got Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, the burden of expectation from day one is Super Bowl, right? So, and Aaron didn't, especially towards the end of his stint, didn't like playing with a lot of young players, right? He wanted like-minded veterans who knew what they were doing. So that kind of closed some of those opportunities. And it just made the calculus different of what you were trying to accomplish in season. I think that burden of expectation, and I get Titletown, Green Bay, the goal is always the Super Bowl. I understand it. I get it. But it certainly feels a lot different. I don't think the vast majority of Packer fans are going into this being like Super Bowl or bust. Like, let's go. I think it's just a lot different season. And I think because of that, it gives you a little bit more leeway to understand both from a front office and a coaching standpoint of like, hey, the goal this year is a lot more about development, clearly of Jordan, but for a lot of these younger players as well, and letting Jordan develop with the Luke Musgraves, the Tucker Crafts, the Jaden Reeds, the Samori Toures, Watson, Dobbs, etc., so that those players can, in particular, grow together. Zach Tom on the offensive line, same thing. And this can be an offense that really is hopefully clicking 2-3 years from now as a collective unit when all of those guys hopefully enter their prime at the same time.
Yeah. It makes sense why they didn't pursue a veteran on the offensice side. It's just going to stunt their growth.
Hell yeah. It's exciting, to see. It's a new era for sure. I guess real quick too, you got a couple of disappointments that there's you don't hear a lot of things where it's like, well, this guy just looks terrible. So I just curious, you being there, what you thought if there was some, obviously the safety position's a thing we've been talking about, but is there anything else that you have some concern with?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one on offense, one on defense. So on offense, I think Josh Myers has been disappointing so far. And yeah, I was hopeful. So I liked Myers coming out. No, I didn't like him as much as Creed Humphrey. We all know that story. But I did like him, I think, a lot more than people when they initially drafted him, they were going like, how could you draft Myers over Humphrey? And like I said, I would have drafted Humphrey too, but I liked Myers a lot more. And I thought he legitimately had late second, early third round value at that point. I didn't think it was like some crazy reach. It just happened that there was like a first round center that happened to be there at the same time unexpectedly, but I liked him coming out. And I thought his rookie season, while there were ups and downs as a rookie, like if you're even like competent, like semi-competent as a rookie on the offensive line, like it's a real positive step. And I thought he really held his own as a rookie. And yes, again, some ups and downs, but overall fairly steady, fairly like average, like a replacement level player, which again, as a rookie offensive lineman center, you've got Aaron Rodgers behind you. I thought that was actually a fairly positive season, but he did miss a good chunk of that season with an injury as well. Then second year comes along and I'm thinking, like I think a lot of other people were thinking, all right, second year jump. He's going to have a year under his belt. He knows the offense now. He knows the calls at the line of scrimmage. His head's not going to be spinning as much. And we saw, in my opinion, a much worse Josh Myers in 2022 than what we saw in 2021. And you never want to see a step back in that second year. If anything, again, you want to see that step forward. This is, in my opinion, was a fairly significant step back and just a lot of inconsistency. And there'd be times where he would go 15, 20 plays and it would look pretty good. And then there'd be another 15, 20 plays that'd be like, oh my goodness, what the heck is going on? Like you just like forget to play football for a handful of series. And then, I was still semi-hopeful coming into this offseason because there was sort of times where Rodgers would really get after Josh Myers and, not be afraid to call him out on the field. And maybe I was, maybe hopeful that maybe Myers just didn't respond well to that. And it was just kind of super conscientious of a Hall of Fame quarterback, getting on him if he did something wrong. And sometimes when you fear doing something wrong all the time, like that's all you focus on, right? Rather than just playing football and letting things flow freely. And I was hopeful that maybe, different quarterback, a little bit more laid back, that he was just going to be able to go out and play football and not have to worry about those things so much. And unfortunately for him, I just haven't seen that so far. I've seen a lot of the inconsistencies still. And I just like TJ Slayton's eating his lunch every day. And it hasn't been the progress that I've been hoping to see. On the defensive side, we talked about Carrington Valentine, Rasul Douglas. Jaire's been maybe the best player in training camp so far. Like there's been a lot of really positives for this defensive backfield. They're going to get Stokes back at some point, but it's that next group of players at corner, from Keandre Thomas to Shamar Jean-Charles to Innis Gaines to that group of corners where I haven't seen really much of anything in a step to potentially be on the right track to being able to play. Corey Ballantyne, same thing. I haven't seen much from those guys that would give me any faith if they actually have to play in games. So some of the corner depth has been a little bit concerning as well.
Yeah. So we have two different teams that we're going to be doing joint practices with this year. It seems like Matt LaFleur is really big on them, that he sees the value, kind of like I do, that, you're going against the same people every single day in practice, that it would be better to go up against somebody who you're not used to their moves every single time. And I was wondering what your opinion of the joint practices are, and if you've seen a different temperature level with the team this year, because we knew Aaron Rodgers wasn't a big fan of it himself.
Yeah, no, I think it's a phenomenal thing. And I think they're going to get a lot of reps against unfamiliar looks and opponents. I think that's going to be super beneficial for a really young team. And like I said, this is a season that's about progress and it's about growth. And anytime that you can get valuable snaps, whether it be in preseason, whether it can be in joint practices, whether it's in the regular season, I think all of those are extremely valuable for a really young team. So really looking forward to hearing the updates from Cincinnati on Wednesday, and then, seeing the Patriots and Packers practice next week as well. This is really a fun part, especially when you have a really young team is starting to see these guys in live action. And I think it's going to be really, really beneficial for a young Packers core at this point.
For sure. And hopefully there's not too many fights.
Exactly.
All right. So the other thing we wanted to talk about was family night. So obviously there's nothing like family night anywhere else in the NFL. I was wondering what was the overall vibe? So obviously we heard, the ovation that Jordan Love got and everything, but what were some of your takeaways from family night?
Yeah, I think, Jordan had some ups and downs. I thought that his day was basically reminiscent of his first week of practice. The first part of practice was like his first day first part of family night was like the first day of practice, where he had some inaccuracies, missed some guys down the field. The second part was like the second day of practice, where it was kind of nondescript, hit a couple throws, but they were kind of check downs, not much going on. And then the third day of practice, or the third, live practice, was like the third part of family night, where he was hitting everything and he looked phenomenal, leading the 2-minute drive, 5 of 5 to end the day with a touchdown in the 2-minute drill to Christian Watson on a gorgeous throw. So yeah. I think that's beautiful. What we sort of saw from Jordan. And then, I didn't necessarily think anything else really stood out too much. But again, I think you start seeing some of the penetration ability from Devontae Wyatt, who ran over, Royce Newman in the game at one point. And, overall, I just think it was really, important for these young Packers to get out there in front of a crowd and just kind of start, especially for the rookies, start feeling how that was for Jordan to be the guy at starting quarterback. Like, I just think it was valuable. And I think hopefully that'll lend itself well as they get ready for Cincinnati and joint practices in the first preseason game.
Yeah, you mentioned Wyatt a couple times. Wyatt is one of those guys I think he's going to break out this year. And it's going to be interesting to see how, with drafting Van Ness and having Wyatt on the defensive line, if Van Ness is going to be playing more on the outside or if they're going to put him inside, kind of like how Iowa did every now and then. How do you think that they'll be using Van Ness?
Yeah, so far he's been almost primarily at edge throughout training camp. And I think it's one of the things where they just want him to master edge first, and then they'll start moving him inside. We did see him inside a little bit in OTAs and mini camps, but it seems like almost once training camp start, they just focused him almost entirely on edge, which I think is smart. Let him focus on and try to master something first, and then put more on his plate as time goes on. But as time goes on, I definitely think we're going to see him moved all across the defense and really be used, potentially even in like a Clay Matthews slash Zadarius Smith sort of way, where they can line him up over center, put him on the defensive line, line him up outside. I think has the potential to be a real weapon as a pass rusher.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, that Zadarius Smith comp, I was like, oh man, they could use him in that role and it's perfect timing, So Nate, did you have any other questions? Nate, you muted your mic.
This damn thing. Sorry. Things going crazy. No, I I guess my one thing that not too important. I wish they would stream Family Night somewhere, so we could all watch it, because it's you see the clips and everything, but I think it'd be something awesome for us to be able to see. But I don't really got anything. I know you're kind of cutting it close to time, Andy.
No, for sure. But no, I agree with you though. I wish they would. I wish they would stream that for everyone else. At least like give your season ticket holders and your shareholders like something, if nothing else. But like, I mean, if you are going to be, at least in the conversation for America's team and things like that, then like open it up. And it's all out there anyway. Like every one of Jordan Love's throws is out there right now on Twitter. Like just open it up. It's not going to hurt.
It's a special night that packs the dang stadium. Let people see what's going on.
Exactly.
So. But I said thanks so much for joining us. Again, Pack a Day Podcast. You can find Andy on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can find Pack a Day Podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Is there anything else you're working on right now besides obviously swamped with training camp?
No, that's pretty much it, guys. But appreciate you having me. Like I said, always fun chatting Packers, and best of luck to you guys moving forward with the new venture.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Couple more things, I guess, before we're out of here. That was awesome. I was happy to have Andy on. But I guess I had to get through a couple things. I think we all kind of have the same concerns. I don't know what you think. But it was nice to hear from a guy with boots on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he can do so much more than what we can do, because we would have to put forth so much effort and research. And I mean, he's already done it. He's there. You know what I mean? Like, I just figured it's just, he was like the perfect guest to have on to talk about training camp. It's awesome.
Oh yeah. So that quick episode for the week. Before we get out of here, like I said, check out the show, codestyles.com. All our interviews, everything will be there. You can find myself at Twitter at Nate_Dirt19. You can find Bobby at Bobby A Winner, and our guest Andy Herman NFL on Twitter. Check out the show, and thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see y'all next week.